Namaskar and welcome viewers. I am Surbhi Unyal. I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. This is a series on philosophy of mind and we were doing the mind-body dualism. In the last lecture, we talked about Descartes' mind-body dualism, where we had just started to talk about how Descartes was trying to find certainty, and in trying to find certainty, he came to a conclusion that the senses cannot be trusted because the senses can often deceive us. So, sense perception cannot be the source of our knowledge. Today we are going to talk further and see what are the arguments that he has proposed in order to talk about the mind-body dualism. So we are going to start with the second meditation, which is the nature of the human mind and how it is better known than body. So as I was mentioning you that in the previous meditation, Descartes has discarded that the senses cannot be the sources of knowledge or cannot give us certainty. So he further examines that if his senses and body does not exist, then does it mean that he too does not exist? To this he says that I certainly exist, as it is the I that is doubting. Since it is the I that doubts, which proves that I necessarily exist, as the act of doubting proves the existence of I. Also, as we had mentioned in the last lecture, that there is a deceiver who is often deceiving us. With this deceiver who is often deceiving us, there has to be somebody who is deceived. So, also there is a deceiver who is constantly deceiving us, which proves that I exist as being deceived. So here Descartes says that there is a deceiver who constantly deceives him, which again proves his existence as he exists as the one who is deceived. This is how demon argument culminates in the ontological distinction between mind and the body, where mind necessarily exists even without the body or the external world. Descartes wonders about what is I that necessarily exists. The first thought that came to his mind while wondering about I is that he had a face, hands, arms, and a whole mechanical structure which he calls the body. Secondly, he thought that this I can move about, nourishes, thinks, and have sense perceptions, which are attributed to the soul or the mind. Body is defined by him as that which has a specific shape, can occupy space, and is located in a definable space. It can be known through sense perception. The attributes assigned to body seems dubitable, as there is a demon who can deceive us. So all these attributes have been doubted by Descartes except one, which is that he thinks. So it is thought which is inseparable from him, that is the I. So I exist as long as it is thinking. Therefore, he states that I am then, in the strict sense, only a thing that thinks. So I is a thinking thing which is real and which truly exists. So this whole argument is known as the cogito argument, where Descartes is trying to prove the existence of I from what he says is that this I is the thinking I. So to exist means that to think. So I think, therefore I am, is what he has established here. The second argument that he gives is the wax argument. Here he says that the meditator then moves on to ask how he comes to know of this I. The senses, as we have seen, cannot be trusted. Similarly, he concludes that he cannot trust imagination. The imagination can conjure up ideas of all sorts of things that are not real. So, it cannot be the guide to knowing his own essence. Meditator remains puzzled. That is, as he has concluded he is a thinking thing, why is it that he has such a distinct grasp of what his body is and has such a distinct time identified, that is this I that thinks? So in order to understand this difficulty, he considers how he come to know of a piece of wax just taken from the honeycomb, through the senses or by some other means. He first considers what he can know about the piece of wax by means of the senses, that is, its taste, smell, color, shape, size, hardness, etc. So all these are something that we know through the senses. So the meditator then asks, what happens when the piece of wax is placed near the fire and melted? All of these sensible qualities change, so that, for instance, it is now soft when before it was hard. Nonetheless, the same piece of wax remains. So when you actually try to describe wax through your sense perception, which were, let's say, earlier it was hard, but now since it was placed near the fire and it melted, the whole idea has now changed. So whole description has now changed from being hard to being soft. But still, there is something which remains. So what is that something? That something is a piece of wax that still remains. So our knowledge that the solid piece of wax and the melted piece of wax are the same cannot come through senses, since all of these sensible properties have changed. So meditator considers what he can now know about the piece of wax and concludes that he can know only that it is extended, flexible and changeable. He does not come to know this through the senses and realizes that it is impossible that he comes to know the wax by means of the imagination. Why? Because the wax can change into an infinite number of different shapes, and he cannot run through all these shapes in his imagination. Instead, he concludes that he knows the wax by means of intellect alone. After all, we might say, I see the wax, though in saying that we refer to the wax as the intellect perceives it, rather than to its color or shape. This is similar to the way in which we might see people down the streets. When we really see their coats or hat, our intellect and not our eyes judges that there are people and not automata under the coats and the hats. So the meditator here concludes that, contrary to his initial impulses, that the mind is far better knower than the body. Further, he suggests he must know his mind far better than any other things. After all, as he has admitted, he may not be perceiving the piece of wax at all. It may be a dream or an illusion. But when he is perceiving the piece of wax, he cannot doubt that he is perceiving, nor that he is judging what he perceives to be a piece of wax. And both of these acts as thoughts imply that he exists. So every thought we might have about the world outside us can only doubtfully be true of the outside world. But it must with certainty confirm our own existence and establish the nature of our own mind. Now coming on to the sixth meditation, it is where the mind-body dualism has been elaborately and extensively discussed by Descartes. This meditation is titled as The Existence of Material Things and the Real Distinction Between Mind and the Body. Here Descartes started it by considering the existence of material things. He states, I quote, "And at least I now know they are capable of existing insofar as they are the subject matter of pure mathematics, since I perceive them clearly and distinctly," unquote. He states that he has a clear and distinct idea of himself as a thing which is not extended in space and is a thinking thing. On the other hand, he has a distinct idea of body which is extended in the space and is not non-thinking. So what does he mean to say here is that here basically he is making a clear-cut distinction between mind and the body, where he is saying that when he thinks of himself, what comes to his mind is that he is a thinking thing, and this thinking thing is not extended. In contrast to that, he has a body, and that body is extended in space and it is non-thinking thing. So he concludes that he is certain that he is really distinct from his body and can exist without it. He makes a distinction between himself and his body, where he or the mind is thinking and non-extended thing, while body is extended and non-thinking thing, and concludes that he can exist even without the body. So in saying that he can exist without the body, he wants to show that the mind is self-contained, or that he is self-contained and is independent of the body. So even if the body doesn't exist, the mind will exist. And in saying that the mind will exist, he wants to prove that he exists because he is using himself and mind to be interchangeably, since he is a thinking thing. So he says that this mind is independent of the body, and both of them, body can exist without the mind and the mind can exist without the body. So body or material objects are spatial, as in they occupy a location in space and exhibit spatial dimensions, whereas mental objects or mind are non-spatial because they are not extended in space. Material substance is public, whereas mental substance is private. So Descartes says that material substance or the body is public because it is in the public sphere and anybody can see it, while the mental substance or the mind is private. So no one else can see the mind. Only the one who has the mind can be aware that he has a mind, but no one else can ever see it. So it is private. Material substance is complex and can be divided into parts, while mental substances cannot be divided into parts. What does it mean? This is what is meant by the divisibility principle. According to the divisibility principle, Descartes observes that there is another contrast between mind and the body, which is based on the idea of divisibility principle. He argues that body by its nature is divisible and mind is indivisible. Being divisible means to be broken down into parts, and mind cannot be divided into parts. So it is the body which you can divide into parts, but we can never divide mind into parts. So mind is not divisible while the body is divisible. So mind has different faculties like will, imagination, intellect and sensory perceptions. However, these cannot be called as the different parts of the mind, because it is the same mind which has these faculties. So unlike the mind, body is easily divisible into the smaller parts. In any part of or you can say in any part of the body like leg or arm, if any part is cut off from the body, still nothing is taken away from the mind, even though apparently there is a union between mind and the body. So the argument shows that even if the body is destroyed entirely, the mind or the soul is not harmed. It merely leaves the body. So bodily death, as Descartes asserts, is merely a change of shape and configuration in the component parts of the matter of which the body is composed. This implies that the soul or mind can exist independent of the body. So the distinction made between mind and the body by Descartes shows that these are two distinct substances which inherit different properties and can exist independent of each other. We can without any doubt see that mind and body are closely linked to each other. Take for example, feeling pain when the leg gets hurt in an accident, or when one feels thirsty, then the body is in a need of water. Descartes says there is nothing that my own nature teaches me more vividly than that I have a body, and that when I feel pain, there is something wrong with the body, and that there is some truth in this. Further, he states that mind and body are single unit in the sense that they are closely joined or intermingled. It cannot be held that mind is in the body just like a sailor is in the ship, because in that case the body would not be hurt, just as the sailor is not hurt when the ship is damaged. Hence, the idea that mind is in the body just as the sailor is in the ship is confusing. So from this sixth meditation, it is clear that for Descartes, there are two substances, mental and physical. Descartes believes that each substance possesses a distinctive attribute. It is the attribute that makes a substance the kind of substance it is. So material substance is a substance possessing the attributes of extension. A mental substance, in contrast, is a substance possessing a very different attribute, that is the attribute of thought. So, bodies are material substances possessing attributes of extension. Mind too are substances, but not the material substances. Mind possesses the attribute of thought. So, every substance possesses exactly one attribute. So, if a substance possesses the attribute of extension, then it cannot possess the attribute of thought and vice versa. Thought and extension are they mutually exclude one another. Though Descartes embraces this idea, he does not deny that mind and the body are intimately related. He believes that we are related intimately to a particular body, that is our own body. So, when your finger comes too near to the flame of a candle, you feel pain. When my finger goes near to the flame, in contrast, you feel no pain, but I do. What does it mean? It means that there is some kind of interaction between our own minds and the body. So, though mental and material substances are distinct, yet they causally interact. Our body's responds to your body responds to your plans and decisions. Your body or your mind receives signals from your body in the form of sensory experiences that provides you with the information about the state of your body and indirectly the states of the world outside your body. The question arises, how are these two distinct things connected to each other? And Descartes states that there is a small part which joins the mind and the body, which is called the pineal gland. According to him, it is the pineal gland which connects the mind to the body. It sends signals or messages from the body to the mind. And this pineal gland is located in the brain and it is the seat of the soul. He further gives an example of horse and a horse rider and says that just as the rider spurs on the horse to run fast with his own energy, so the mind only excites the bodily movement without imputing its own energy into the material series. So Descartes' theory of mind-body dualism has been severely criticized by many of the philosophers. The analogy of this rider and the horse is incorrect because they essentially are of the same nature. However, mind and body constitute different categories. A British philosopher, Gilbert Ryle, says that by filling the mind in the body, Descartes is committing a category mistake. So, looking at all the arguments about the mind-body dualism and the interaction between these two substances which in a way possess contradictory properties and are connected by the pineal gland, has been severely criticized by many philosophers. One such philosopher, as I had just mentioned, is Gilbert Ryle. We will be discussing Gilbert Ryle's critique of Cartesian dualism in our next video, where we will see that according to Ryle, Descartes is committing a category mistake when he is trying to show an interaction between the mind and the body by considering them to be two distinct substances. So, thank you viewers. We will continue our series in the next lecture and we will be talking about Gilbert Ryle's critique of Cartesian dualism.